And there is a new book called Shadow Bosses: Government Unions Control America and Rob Taxpayers Blind. And we have the author of the new book with us, Mallory Factor. Mallory, thanks for joining us here on Morning in America.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the numbers and the extent of public sector union power in America. We know that the unions, unionized workers, as a percentage of the American workforce, has gone down, and I think it's about 7% now in the private sector. The place where it is flourishing is in government unions. Tell me a little bit about it.
41% of government workers are now unionized.
And there's an essential conflict there that I think has troubled people since the New Deal. And how do you explain that conflict there?
Conflict is real simple. The union bosses, who take in billions and billions of dollars a year, take this money and they buy politicians, and when their contracts come up, they sit on the same side of the table with the politician. And the poor taxpayer, he has nobody representing him.
And we have states now like New Jersey and California and Illinois, which have such burdensome contracts with their public service unions that it's very hard to see them actually surviving and paying off these pension obligations in coming years.
That's true. I mean, they will survive. Government always survives. See, that's why the government. That's why the union movement went to government employees, because they recognized that if they make demands in the private sector, eventually, if the demands are too great, they put the companies out of business. But in the government sector, they make outrageous demands, and it's almost impossible, if not impossible, to put government out of business.
Well, now, we've seen what happened in Wisconsin, which did result in a near-death experience for Scott Walker, who had the courage to take on this problem. We see what's coming in California, Illinois, New Jersey, and other states. And so what's going to happen here? I mean, are they going to raise taxes?
Don't forget about Ohio. Just a few months before, Governor Kasich tried to do the same thing.
And did not succeed.
Not only did he not succeed, he got his head handed to him. Now, Scott Walker's a hero, and we go into what he actually did. But Scott Walker didn't do everything he needed to do. I mean, Scott Walker left firemen, policemen, first responders. He gave them a pass. A lot of things didn't change. He just made an incremental step. And that step that he made, the minute he gave those workers freedom, half of them dropped out of the unions.
But we see, obviously, some of the other states that have some of the worst problems do not have Republican governors. They don't have governors who have any inclination to do what Scott Walker has done. And so what lies ahead for them? Is it just tax increases? Is there some way to deal with these obligations they have?
Tax increases, loss of population. The population's moving from the union states to the freer states. See, one of the key things we try to explain in Shadow Bosses is that these union bosses masquerade as pro-worker while they're bankrupting our pension systems and killing our prosperity and destroying K-12 education. But what they're really doing is they're confiscating rank-and-file members' dues to solidify their own power across America and in Washington. Almost more than three-quarters of the money that these unions take in come from the forced dues states. Those are the states, the 22 states, where you can't keep your job unless you pay dues or tribute to the unions.
And so, I mean, how is this going to work out? I mean, what's your bottom line assessment that the power, the number of employees covered by unions, is actually growing in the government sector, unlike the private sector?
That's true.
And yet, at the same time, many more states are having to face up to their fiscal problems than had before. So I just don't see where this is eventually going. I mean, a state cannot declare bankruptcy.
Right.
Well,
that's true. Only.
Can you give us any hope here? Anything?
Well, I mean, it's going to have to get a lot worse before it gets better. I mean, there's going to have to be absolute revolt. But you have to recognize how much money is at stake here. The money is astronomical. These unions take in over $14 billion, yes, $1 billion a year just in dues. and they use they say that themselves they only use 20 to 30% to represent their members. The rest of the money, or a lot of that money, they're using for political purposes. So they are the piggy bank of the Democrat Party.
And so the Democratic Party is going to fight to the death to preserve this. Republicans are, view this as a fight that they want to have. And right now, we have a Democratic president, we have a Democratic Senate. No big deal, no big action on a federal level is going to take place with that. And even if there were a Republican president and Republican House and Senate, would that change much of anything?
Well, we're making incremental steps. First of all, anytime you give workers freedom, and we show this in Shadow Bosses, anytime you give workers freedom, they choose not to be in the unions. The only way the unions can get them is by forcing them. And we also show how in 43 states you can't sell your own labor. You can't petition your own employer, the government. You have this private organization in between you, and that private organization are unions. In all but 7 states, you're under a compulsory collective bargaining if there's a union there. And some of the states are going to start getting rid of this too. When this happens, when they get rid of it, union dues start to drop. And as their dues drop, so does their power. So state by state, you may see changes being made. And as those changes are made, their power will decrease. The way we got into this whole book is by following the money. And the money keeps leading back to the government employee unions. When I talk about this $14 billion, that's like the economy of a lot of countries.
Right.
Just the teachers' unions, for instance, take in over $2 billion a year. That's a lot of money to throw around politically.
No kidding. Mark, listen, thanks so much. Mallory Factor, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's Mallory Factor, author of Shadow Bosses, Government Unions Control America and Rob Taxpayers Blind.